Robert Mitchell's arthritic fingers trembled as he reached for the weathered suitcase, his morning walk forgotten, the German shepherd's amber eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. The dog didn't guard the suitcase. He pushed it toward Bob with his scarred muzzle, revealing photographs that weren't abandoned memories but yesterday's Amber Alert. 3 joggers stumbled to a halt, one woman's water bottle clattering on concrete as the massive shepherd began arranging 5 photos in a deliberate pattern, his damaged ear twitching with each calculated movement while tears streamed down Bob's weathered face. Helen would have known what to do. His wife always understood broken things, but she'd been gone exactly 1 year today, leaving him as lost as this strange guardian who now pawed urgently at a photo of 8-year-old Madison Chen, missing for 72 hours. "Call 911, Bob commanded, his teacher's authority returning after months of silence. What kind of hell had this dog escaped, and why did those intelligent eyes suggest the real horror hadn't even begun? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The morning fog rolled in from the Pacific, shrouding Palisades Park in a gray embrace that matched Bob Mitchell's mood perfectly. At 68, he'd become one of those invisible seniors who haunted Santa Monica's benches, retired teachers whose students had long forgotten them, whose spouses had departed too soon, whose days blended into an endless stream of walks, medications, and daytime television. Bob had taught American history at Lincoln Middle School for 45 years. He'd shaped thousands of young minds, mediated countless playground disputes, and could read a child's troubles in their posture alone. Now, 6 months from eviction from his rent-controlled apartment on Montana Avenue, he felt as discarded as the fast food wrappers tumbling across the park's manicured lawn. The German shepherd, Duke, according to the military tag dangling from his torn collar, was everything Bob wasn't anymore. Alert, purposeful, needed. Despite the scars mapping his black and tan coat like a tragic atlas, despite the mangled left ear that spoke of violence Bob couldn't imagine, the dog radiated a fierce intelligence that reminded him of his brightest students. Those amber eyes held knowledge, purpose, and something else, desperation barely held in check by ironclad training. Margaret Sullivan would have been walking these same paths if her children hadn't imprisoned her in Sunset Gardens Senior Living for her own good. At 72, the widow of a successful real estate developer commanded a fortune she no longer cared about, and memories that tortured her nightly. Her son James had been her universe, a Marine K-9 handler who'd written faithfully every week from Afghanistan until the letters stopped coming 2 years ago, along with his heartbeat. She'd hidden her diagnosis from everyone, even her daughter Patricia, who visited dutifully every Sunday to complain about her husband and count down to her inheritance. The doctors gave Margaret 6 months, maybe 8. She'd decided to spend them remembering James, not fighting the inevitable. Dr. Sarah Chen understood fighting inevitable things. At 45, the veterinarian worked 18-hour days at the county's last low-cost animal clinic, serving the pets of people society had written off. Her ex-husband, Richard, had taken everything in the divorce except their daughter, Emma. California's custody laws favored mothers, even exhausted, financially drowning ones. The clinic faced closure in 30 days unless she could raise $50,000, money that might as well have been $50 million. Emma, 8 years old, with her mother's determined chin and her father's calculating eyes, had stopped asking for things. She'd learned to recognize the tired, "maybe later, sweetheart," that meant never. But she still dreamed of a dog, sketching German shepherds in her school notebooks with the devotion of a child who believed love could heal anything. Santa Monica itself was changing. The homeless camps expanding despite million-dollar condos rising like glass tombstones along the coast. The recent news about a child trafficking ring operating from the port had shattered the city's carefully maintained illusion of safety, 5 children missing in 2 months. Parents clutched their kids tighter, eyed strangers with suspicion, and whispered about monsters hiding in plain sight. Into this ecosystem of loss, fear, and fading hope, Duke had arrived like a four-legged prophecy, carrying secrets that would either destroy or redeem them all. Bob's hand shook as he dialed 911, the phone slippery in his sweaty palm. Duke sat perfectly still beside him, those intelligent amber eyes never leaving the scattered photographs. The morning joggers had formed a semicircle around them, their smartphones out, recording everything. 911, what's your emergency? This is Robert Mitchell. I'm at Palisades Park near the ocean overlook. I found evidence related to the missing children, photographs, current ones. There's a dog here who... Sir, did you say a dog brought you photographs? The dispatcher's tone shifted from professional to patronizing. Are you experiencing any confusion? Do you need medical assistance? No, I'm not confused. Bob's teacher voice emerged, sharp with authority. Listen to me. These are pictures of Madison Chen and at least 4 other children. They're recent. The dog clearly knows something about... Sir, I'm sending a unit to check on you. Please remain where you are. The line went dead. Bob stared at the phone, fury rising in his chest. Around him the crowd murmured, some already walking away, dismissing him as another confused old man in a city full of them. Duke nudged the suitcase with his scarred muzzle, then looked pointedly at Bob. Inside, beyond the photographs, lay military dog tags reading SGT James Sullivan, USMC, a USB drive wrapped in plastic, a smaller collar stained with what looked horrifyingly like dried blood, and a hand-drawn map marked with red X's along the Santa Monica coastline. "We need to get you to a vet," Bob said, noting the way Duke favored his right rear leg. The dog's coat, despite its scars, showed signs of recent grooming, suggesting he'd escaped from somewhere rather than being abandoned. Someone who'll actually listen. The walk to Dr. Chen's clinic took 20 minutes, Duke limping beside him, the suitcase clutched in Bob's arms like a lifeline. The All Creatures Animal Clinic occupied a converted house on Pico Boulevard, its faded sign and barred windows speaking to the neighborhood's decline. Bob had passed it countless times, never imagining he'd need its services. Sarah Chen looked up from examining a cat, her eyes widening at the sight of Duke. German Shepherd, male, approximately 3 years old, she muttered, her professional assessment automatic. Those scars. God, what happened to you? I found him at Palisades Park, Bob began, but Duke had already moved, positioning himself where he could watch both doors and the window. He had this suitcase. There are photos of missing children inside and... Slow down, Sarah said, her exhaustion evident in the lines around her eyes. Let me examine him first. Then you can tell me everything. As Sarah ran her hands over Duke's scarred body, the dog remained perfectly still, only flinching when she touched a fresh wound on his shoulder. This is recent, she said. Maybe 3 days old. And these scars, some are surgical. This dog's been through hell. She scanned for a microchip, and her face went pale as data populated her computer screen. This can't be right. According to this, he's registered to the Department of Defense. Status: deceased, killed in action 24 months ago in Afghanistan. Bob's mind raced. The dog tags in the suitcase. James Sullivan, USMC. Could he have been the handler? Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard. James Sullivan. Here, Marine K-9 handler, specialized in human trafficking interdiction, killed in a convoy bombing along with his K-9 partner. She looked at Duke, who met her gaze steadily. But you're very much alive, aren't you? Duke moved then, purposefully, to the suitcase Bob had set down. He pawed at it until Bob opened it, then carefully picked up one of the photographs with his teeth, carrying it to Sarah. She gasped. The picture showed Madison Chen, but she was holding a newspaper dated 2 days ago. "These aren't old photos," Bob said. "He's documenting something current, something happening now." Duke dropped the photo and moved to the door, scratching at it with increasing urgency. When Bob didn't move fast enough, the dog returned, grabbed his sleeve gently but firmly in his teeth, and pulled. "He wants us to follow him," Sarah said, disbelief and wonder mixing in her voice. "This dog is trying to show us something." Bob looked at the map from the suitcase, at the red X marks clustered near the water. "I think he knows where these children are, and I think he escaped from whoever took them to find help." Duke's tail, which hadn't wagged once since Bob found him, twitched slightly, just once, as if to say, "Finally, someone understands." Duke led them through Santa Monica's quieter streets, his gait purposeful despite the limp. Bob struggled to keep up, his arthritic knees protesting, while Sarah had locked her clinic with a hastily scrawled sign. "Emergency. Back soon." The dog stopped repeatedly, looking back to ensure they followed, his scarred face patient but urgent. They reached a modest apartment building on 14th Street, its beige stucco walls tagged with graffiti. Duke went straight to the entrance, scratching frantically at the security door. Bob tried the handle, locked. Duke then did something remarkable. He sat, raised his right paw, and tapped the door handle 3 times, paused, then twice more. "He's giving us a code," Sarah whispered. Before Bob could respond, the door buzzed open. Duke shot through, taking the stairs despite his injured leg. 4th floor. He stopped at apartment 4B, pawing at the door with increasing desperation. From inside came muffled sounds, thuds, scraping, what might have been crying. Bob knocked. "Hello? Is someone in there?" The sound stopped. Duke whined, the first vocalization they'd heard from him, and began scratching at the door gap, his claws leaving marks on the wood. "We should call the police," Sarah said, but Bob was already remembering the dispatcher's dismissive tone. "They think I'm a confused old man." He knocked harder. "This is Robert Mitchell. I'm a teacher. If someone needs help in there." The door to 4A opened, revealing a heavy-set man in a Lakers jersey. "You need to get that mutt out of here before I call management. No dogs allowed in this building." Duke turned to face the man, his entire demeanor changing. The scarred German shepherd lowered his head, ears flat, a low growl rumbling from his chest. The man stepped back, slamming his door. "We need to go," Sarah said. "We're trespassing." But Duke had moved to the stairwell window, pawing at it until Bob looked out. Perfect view of the parking lot, where a white van sat idling, no license plates, windows tinted black. As they watched, a man emerged from the building's rear entrance carrying a large duffel bag. The bag moved. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. Duke was already heading down the stairs. Bob's phone rang. Margaret Sullivan's name on the caller ID. He'd volunteered at Sunset Gardens, teaching history to the residents, knew Margaret from her fierce intelligence and sadder eyes. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Margaret Sullivan. I saw the news footage from the park." "That dog," her voice broke. "That's my son's dog. That's Rex. James called him Rex." "Mrs. Sullivan, I can't talk right now. Please." The desperation in her voice stopped him. "I have a letter from James. He said if anything happened to him, Rex would find his way home. He said to trust the dog completely." "He knows things, Mr. Mitchell. Things about a trafficking ring they uncovered in Afghanistan that had connections here. That's why they were killed. At least, that's what they wanted everyone to believe." The white van was pulling away. Duke looked between the van and Bob, clearly torn. "Where are you?" Margaret asked. Bob gave her the address. "We're following the dog. He's tracking something." "I'm coming. I don't care what my keepers say. That dog is all I have left of my son." The line went dead. Duke had made his decision, limping rapidly after the van, keeping to the sidewalk. Sarah and Bob followed, Bob's chest burning with exertion. The van moved slowly through residential streets, finally stopping at a warehouse near the Santa Monica airport. Duke immediately went low, belly almost to the ground, moving with military precision despite his injuries. He led them to a chain-link fence surrounding the property, finding a gap barely visible beneath some overgrown bushes. The dog looked back at them, waiting. "We can't go in there," Sarah said. "This is insane. We need police." Bob's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop following or the girl dies." His blood turned to ice. Someone was watching them. Duke, however, seemed unsurprised. He moved through the fence gap and sat on the other side, looking back expectantly. That's when they heard it. A child's scream, quickly muffled from inside the warehouse. Sarah was already squeezing through the fence. "I'm mandated to report child abuse. That overrides everything else." Bob followed, his jacket tearing on the chain link. Duke led them to a loading dock where several vehicles were parked, including the white van. The dog went straight to a particular car, a blue sedan with a "proud parent of a Lincoln Middle School honor student" bumper sticker. Bob's stomach dropped. He knew that car. Duke pawed at the trunk. From inside came whimpering. Sarah found a tire iron. "Stand back." She popped the trunk. Inside, bound and gagged but alive, was Emma, her own daughter. Sarah's scream brought running footsteps from the warehouse. Duke positioned himself between them and the approaching danger, no longer the patient, injured animal they'd been following. This was a military working dog, trained and lethal, ready to defend. "Take Emma and run," Bob said, surprised by his own calmness. "I'll stay with Duke." "You can't. I've been useless for a year," Bob said firmly. "Not anymore. Go!" Sarah lifted Emma, who was conscious but dazed, and ran. Bob stood beside Duke, facing the warehouse as three men emerged. He recognized one immediately, Richard Chen, Sarah's ex-husband. "Mr. Mitchell," Richard said, his doctor's voice still smooth despite the circumstances. "You always were too curious for your own good. Even when you taught my stepdaughter." Duke's growl deepened. Bob's phone rang again. Margaret Sullivan. "We're here," she said. "With friends." Through the fence gap came Margaret, moving faster than any 72-year-old with terminal cancer should. Behind her, 4 men in marine dress uniforms, James Sullivan's squad mates. "Rex!" Margaret called. "My good boy." For the first time since Bob found him, Duke's tail wagged fully, his whole body wiggling with joy even as he maintained his defensive position. He recognized love even after everything. Richard Chen's face went pale. "This isn't what it looks like." One of the Marines spoke. "No, Doctor, it's exactly what it looks like. And Rex here? He's been gathering evidence on you for 2 years. Even death couldn't stop him from completing his mission." Duke barked once, sharp and clear. The sound seemed to echo with all the authority of the Marine who'd trained him, carrying across the warehouse lot like a war cry. Justice, it seemed, had 4 legs and a scarred face. The warehouse lot erupted in chaos. Richard Chen and his associates scattered like rats, but the Marines moved with practiced precision, cutting off escape routes. Rex, Bob mentally corrected, maintained his position between Bob and danger, his scarred body coiled with lethal readiness. "Stand down, Rex," Margaret Sullivan commanded, her voice carrying surprising authority. The dog immediately relaxed his stance but remained alert, amber eyes tracking every movement. She approached slowly, tears streaming down her weathered face. "My brave boy. James would be so proud." One of the Marines, a sergeant with graying temples, spoke into his phone. "We need backup at the warehouse off Bundy Drive. Multiple suspects, possible kidnapping victims inside." "Yes, this is related to the Mitchell call from this morning." He looked at Bob. "We've been monitoring police channels since Margaret called us. Your 911 call raised flags in our network. Bob felt his knees weakening, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. Network? James's unit specialized in trafficking interdiction overseas, the Marine explained. When patterns started emerging here that matched what we saw in Afghanistan, we began our own investigation. But we needed evidence that would hold up in court. Rex was gathering that when he was taken 3 days ago. Margaret knelt beside Rex, running her fingers through his scarred coat. The letter James sent before he died. He said Rex had been trained to document evidence, to remember faces, locations, patterns. He said if anything happened to him, Rex would continue the mission. The sound of sirens grew closer. Richard Chen, held by 2 Marines, had lost his smooth demeanor. You don't understand. It's not just me, the network. They have people everywhere, judges, cops, city officials. Even if you arrest us all today, more children will disappear tomorrow. Rex moved then, purposefully, back to the blue sedan. He pawed at the rear wheel well until Bob looked closer. A small device was magnetically attached. A GPS tracker. He's been marking their vehicles, the sergeant breathed. Jesus Christ, this dog's been running his own surveillance operation. Sarah emerged from behind a parked car, Emma clinging to her neck. She's okay, she called out. Drugged, but okay? Her eyes found Richard, and Bob saw murder there. You took our daughter, your own stepdaughter. She wasn't the target, Richard said coldly. She saw something she shouldn't have at the clinic. We had to. Rex's growl cut him off. The dog had positioned himself between Richard and the little girl, hackles raised. Police cars screamed into the lot, followed by unmarked federal vehicles. What followed was controlled chaos, arrests, evidence collection, and the careful processing of the warehouse. Bob gave his statement multiple times, each officer more incredulous than the last about the dog's role. Inside the warehouse, they found horrors that would haunt Bob forever. 17 children in various stages of sedation, prepared for transport. Medical equipment that turned his stomach. Files documenting a network that spanned from Los Angeles to Mexico, from legitimate businesses to cargo ships. Rex led investigators to specific areas, pawing at hidden panels, indicating containers with evidence. He worked with mechanical precision, occasionally looking back at Margaret as if reporting to James through her. He's maintaining chain of custody, one FBI agent marveled. He won't let anyone touch evidence until an investigator is present to document it. This is admissible in court because of him. As afternoon faded to evening, Bob found himself sitting on a concrete barrier, Margaret beside him. Rex lay between them, his head on Margaret's lap, but his eyes on Bob. James rescued him from a fighting ring when he was a puppy, Margaret said softly. Rex was the runt, nearly dead. They said he'd never be suitable for military work, too damaged. James saw something else. She smiled through fresh tears. My son had a gift for seeing strength where others saw only brokenness. Like teacher, like dog, Bob murmured, remembering his own gift for seeing potential in troubled students. Sarah approached, Emma asleep in her arms. The FBI wants to take Emma to a safe house. They say Richard wasn't lying about the network's reach. She looked lost. I don't know what to do. The clinic, our life here. You'll stay with me, Margaret said firmly. Both of you. I have more rooms than I know what to do with and better security than any safe house. Mrs. Sullivan, I couldn't. You saved my boy's dog. Rex trusted you enough to show you his evidence. That makes you family. Margaret's tone brooked no argument. Besides, I think Emma and Rex need each other. As if understanding, Rex lifted his head to sniff the sleeping child. His tail wagged once, gently. The sergeant approached. Ma'am, we need to debrief Rex. There's a protocol for military working dogs who've witnessed crimes. But given the circumstances, he stays with me, Margaret said. Whatever debriefing you need can happen at my home. He's done enough. Bob watched the interplay with growing amazement. The dog who'd appeared on that bench wasn't just a witness or victim, he was an active agent in his own right, carrying out his handler's final mission with determination that humbled everyone present. "Mr. Mitchell?" an FBI agent called. "We need you to look at something." They led him to a mobile command unit where screens displayed the contents of the USB drive from Rex's suitcase. Hundreds of photos, tagged with dates and GPS coordinates, children being moved, license plates, faces of perpetrators. But what stopped Bob's heart were the photos from inside various buildings, including Lincoln Middle School. "You taught there," the agent said. It wasn't a question. 45 years. Bob's mouth was dry. "Are you saying 3 of your former colleagues are in these photos? We think they were identifying vulnerable children, kids from broken homes, recent immigrants, ones who wouldn't be immediately missed." Bob thought he might be sick. Children he'd taught, protected, loved, betrayed by people they trusted. People he had trusted. Rex appeared at his side, pressing against Bob's leg. The warmth and solid presence grounded him. "He's been inside your school," the agent continued. "Some of these photos are from last week. We think Rex escaped during a transfer, made his way to somewhere he associated with safety, maybe from reconnaissance, maybe instinct. That bench where you found him, it has a clear view of both the school and the trafficking route along the coast." Bob looked down at Rex. "You chose me. Out of everyone in that park, you chose the retired teacher." Understanding dawned. "Because you knew I'd recognize the children. You knew I'd care enough to act." Rex met his gaze steadily, and Bob could swear he saw James Sullivan looking back at him, a Marine's determination wrapped in fur and scars. The next hours blurred together. More children found in a secondary location Rex identified. Parents reunited with kids they'd thought lost forever. The dawning scope of how a military dog had done what human investigators couldn't, infiltrated the network from inside, gathering evidence while playing the role of traumatized animal. As midnight approached, they gathered at Margaret's Brentwood estate. The house sprawled across manicured grounds, speaking to old money and careful preservation. But it felt empty, haunted by absence. "James's room is upstairs," Margaret said to Sarah. "Third door on the right. Everything's ready for Emma." While Sarah settled her daughter, Margaret led Bob to the living room where Rex was already sprawled before the fireplace, finally allowing exhaustion to show. "I need to tell you something," Margaret said, pouring whiskey with hands that barely trembled. "About James's death. What they told me never made sense. A convoy bombing, they said. But James's last letter, sent just days before, mentioned they'd uncovered something big. American involvement in the trafficking network. He said Rex had the evidence, that if anything happened, Rex would know what to do." "You think James was murdered?" "I know he was." Margaret's eyes were steel. "But I'm an old woman with cancer. Who'd believe me? So I waited. I knew Rex was alive, don't ask me how, I just knew, and I knew he'd find a way home." Bob accepted the whiskey gratefully. "He found me instead." "No, Mr. Mitchell. He found exactly who he needed. A teacher who'd spent his life protecting children, a man of integrity in a city increasingly without it, someone who'd see past the surface to the truth beneath." She smiled sadly. "James would have liked you." Rex lifted his head, whining softly. Margaret went to him immediately. "What is it, boy?" The dog padded to a bookshelf, pawing at a specific photo. James in dress blues, Rex beside him in military harness. Behind the frame, Margaret found another USB drive. "My God," she breathed. "He hid it here?" "When?" Bob remembered. "The night he escaped. He didn't just run. He came here first, left you insurance, then went to find help." The drive contained everything: names, dates, financial records, recorded conversations. The trafficking network's entire structure, including the military contractors who'd arranged James's death. "This is why they wanted Rex dead," Margaret said. "He doesn't just know where the evidence is. He is the evidence. Every crime scene he's been to, every face he's memorized, every pattern he's observed, he's a living database of their crimes." Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mommy said there's a dog?" Rex immediately softened, approaching the child with gentle care. Emma, showing no fear despite her ordeal, wrapped her arms around his neck. "Is he safe?" she whispered. "The safest dog in the world," Bob assured her. "He's a hero." "Like in my drawings?" Emma's face lit up. "I always draw German shepherds saving people. Mommy says I'm silly." Sarah appeared behind her daughter. "Not silly at all, baby. Sometimes our dreams know things before we do." They sat together, an unlikely family forged by crisis. Rex positioned himself where he could watch all entrances while staying close to Emma. Even in safety, he remained on duty. "What happens now?" Bob asked. "Now we fight," Margaret said. "With Rex's evidence and testimony, we can bring down the entire network. But they'll come for him. For all of us." "Then we stick together," Sarah said firmly. "No more isolation, no more vulnerability." Bob looked at each face: Margaret's fierce determination, Sarah's protective strength, Emma's innocent trust, and Rex's unwavering vigilance. For the first time since Helen died, he didn't feel alone. "You know," he said slowly, "I've been thinking about suicide lately. Planning it, actually. My apartment, my loneliness, the feeling that I'd outlived my usefulness." He met Rex's knowing gaze. "But if a dog can survive everything Rex has survived and still fight for justice, still protect innocence, still choose hope, then maybe this old teacher has a few lessons left to learn." Rex moved to him, placing his scarred head on Bob's knee. The gesture was deliberate, acknowledging Bob's pain while offering comfort. "We all have our scars," Margaret said softly. "Some visible, some hidden. But scars mean we survived. And survival is its own form of resistance." Outside, federal agents maintained their watch. The network would strike back. That was certain. But inside Margaret's home, a strange peace settled. A Marine's mother, a desperate veterinarian, a lost child, a forgotten teacher, and a dog who refused to let death stop his mission. "James used to say Rex could sense good people," Margaret said. "That he'd been through so much evil, he could recognize genuine kindness instantly. That morning in the park, he didn't just choose someone who'd help. He chose someone who'd understand." Bob stroked Rex's scarred ear. "Understand what?" "That broken doesn't mean worthless. That old doesn't mean useless. That sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come from those societies already written off." She raised her glass. "To the forgotten ones who refuse to be forgotten." They toasted silently, each lost in thought. Emma had fallen asleep against Rex, her small hand tangled in his fur. The dog wouldn't move, standing guard over innocence the way James had taught him. "There's something else," Margaret said eventually. "The district attorney called while you were being interviewed. He wants Rex to testify." "Dogs can't testify," Sarah protested. "No, but they can demonstrate. Rex can identify suspects in lineups, lead investigators to evidence, respond to questions through his training. It's been done before with military dogs. His actions, properly documented, become evidence themselves." Bob felt a chill, They'll try to discredit him, say he's traumatized, unreliable. Let them try. Margaret's voice was iron. My son's dog has more integrity than any human in that network, and we'll be there beside him. All of us. Rex's tail thumped once against the floor. Agreement, acceptance, determination. The night deepened around them, but none moved to sleep. Too much had happened. Too much lay ahead. But in that moment, in the firelight's glow, they weren't victims anymore. They were witnesses. They were fighters. They were family. The container ship, Pacific Dream, sat at berth like a steel mountain against the pre-dawn darkness. Rex's entire body had gone rigid the moment they'd turned onto the port access road, his scarred frame trembling with recognition and purpose. "That's it," FBI Special Agent Diana Martinez said from the driver's seat. "Our intel suggests they're moving the children at exactly 3:47 a.m., high tide, shift change, minimal security overlap." Bob checked his watch. 3:31 a.m. 16 minutes. Beside him in the surveillance van, Margaret gripped Rex's collar with white knuckles. The dog hadn't taken his eyes off the ship since they'd arrived. "Why that specific time?" Sarah asked from the back, her veterinary bag clutched like armor. "Richard talked," Martinez replied. "Your ex-husband broke after 12 hours, gave us shipping schedules, security codes, names, but he insists there are children on that ship who weren't in the warehouse. Kids they've been holding for special buyers." Rex whined, low and urgent, his muscles bunched, ready to spring. "He knows something," Margaret said. "In his letters, James wrote that Rex could smell fear pheromones from almost 100 yards away. If there are children on that ship—" The radio crackled. "All units, stand by. We have movement on deck." Through the van's tinted windows, they watched crew members emerge, moving with purpose toward the cargo holds. Bob counted 7 men, all armed. "Federal agents are positioned around the perimeter," Martinez assured them. "The moment we confirm children are aboard," Rex exploded into motion. Despite his injuries, despite Margaret's grip, he burst from the van with a force that sent the elderly woman stumbling. The dog streaked across the portyard, a black and tan shadow heading straight for the ship. "Rex, no!" Margaret's scream pierced the night. "Stand down! Stand down!" Martinez shouted into her radio. "We have a civilian dog on approach." But Rex wasn't approaching like a civilian anything. He moved like the military working dog he was, low, fast, using cover. The crew members hadn't spotted him yet. Bob was out of the van before his mind caught up with his body. "I'm going after him." "Mr. Mitchell, you can't." But Bob was already running, his arthritic knees forgotten. Behind him he heard Sarah. "If that dog gets shot saving children while we sit here safe—" The portyard stretched like a battlefield. Containers stacked like monuments, shadows deep enough to hide armies. Bob's chest burned, his legs screamed, but Rex had chosen him that morning in the park. He wouldn't abandon that trust now. Rex reached the ship's gangway and didn't hesitate. Up he went, 3 legs working while the injured one dragged. Bob saw crew members turning, shouts rising, weapons lifting. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" The night erupted with searchlights and sirens. Chaos. Beautiful, life-saving chaos. Crew members scattered, torn between Rex's approach and the federal agents swarming their position. In the confusion, Rex vanished into the ship's interior. Bob reached the gangway as agents secured the deck. "I have to follow him," he gasped to Martinez. "He's heading somewhere specific." "You're a civilian." "I'm a teacher," Bob interrupted. "And there are children in there who need someone who isn't carrying a gun." Martinez's expression shifted. She handed him a radio. "Channel 3. Don't be a hero." The ship's interior was a metal maze. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. Bob followed the sound of Rex's claws on steel, down, always down, toward the ship's belly. He found Rex at a sealed cargo hold, the dog throwing his full weight against the door. His paws were bleeding from the effort, leaving red smears on white paint. From behind the door came sounds that froze Bob's blood, muffled crying, children's voices. "Rex, move!" Bob commanded, searching for the door mechanism. The dog backed up 3 steps, then launched himself at a specific spot on the door, not the handle, but a hidden panel Bob hadn't noticed. It popped open, revealing an emergency release. "How did you—" Bob stopped. Of course. James had trained Rex for ship infiltration. This wasn't his first cargo hold. The door swung open. The smell hit first. Fear, waste, despair. Then Bob's eyes adjusted, and he nearly fell to his knees. 23 children, ages maybe 4 to 14, huddled in groups. Some were chained. All were terrified. But what broke Bob's heart was their silence, the learned quiet of children who'd been taught that noise brought punishment. Rex moved among them, his whole demeanor changing. Gone was the military precision. He became gentle, approaching each child slowly, letting them touch him, offering comfort. Several children seemed to recognize him. "Teacher?" A small voice spoke in accented English. "Are you teacher?" Bob knelt beside a boy who couldn't have been more than 6. "Yes, I'm a teacher. We're here to take you home." "Rex said you would come," the boy whispered. "He promised." Bob's mind reeled. "Rex told you?" An older girl, maybe 12, spoke up. "He's been here before, 3 times. Brings us food when guards forget. Shows us pictures." She held up a crumpled photo. Bob recognized it from the suitcase. One of the rescued children. "He shows us others who got away. Tells us to hope." Bob's radio crackled. "Mitchell, report. We heard you found them." 23 children, Bob managed. "Get medical down here. And Rex has been visiting them, keeping them alive." The next minutes blurred. Agents and medics flooded in. Children were wrapped in blankets, carried up to waiting ambulances. Rex supervised every movement, positioning himself between children and any sudden motion, comforting those who cried. One little girl wouldn't let go of Rex's fur. She couldn't have been more than 5, with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. Rex lay down beside her, patient as stone, while medics worked around him. "That's Lucia," the older girl told Bob. "They took her mama when they took her. Rex always stays with her longest." Bob's radio buzzed. Sarah's voice. "Bob, we have a problem. Margaret collapsed. Ambulance is taking her to St. John's. She's asking for Rex." The dog's head snapped up at Margaret's name. He looked between Lucia and the door, caught between duties. "Go," Bob told him. "I'll stay with her." Rex hesitated, then gently extracted himself from Lucia's grip. He touched his nose to her hand, then to Bob's, a clear transfer of responsibility. Then he was gone, racing through the ship toward Margaret. Bob gathered Lucia into his arms. She weighed nothing, bird bones and trauma. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now." "Rex's mama?" Lucia asked. Bob understood. In her world, everyone belonged to someone. "Yes. Rex's mama is sick. He needs to help her." "He always helps," Lucia said solemnly, "even when the bad men hurt him, even when he can't eat because he gives us his food. He helps." The stories came out in fragments as children were processed. Rex had been captured during a raid, forced to fight other dogs for the crew's entertainment. But he'd refused, taking beating after beating. They'd tried to break him, use him to terrorize the children. Instead, he'd become their protector, sneaking food, keeping watch, maintaining their hope. "He showed us the sun," one boy said. "When we forgot what it looked like, he brought us pictures of outside." Bob thought of the photos in the suitcase, not just evidence, but lifelines for children in darkness. Martinez appeared at his shoulder. "We need to evacuate. The crew's talking about explosives, fail-safes. Everyone out now." Bob carried Lucia up to the deck where dawn was breaking over the Pacific. The port swarmed with emergency vehicles, media vans already arriving. He spotted Sarah by an ambulance and headed over. "Margaret's stable," Sarah reported. "Exhaustion, her condition, the stress. But she's fighting, demanding to know about Rex and the children." "Where is he?" Sarah pointed to another ambulance where Rex sat guard beside Margaret's gurney. Even at this distance, Bob could see the dog's devotion, eyes never leaving her face, ready to defend against any threat. "The medics tried to examine him," Sarah said. "He won't leave her. I'll have to treat him there." A commotion near the ship drew their attention. The remaining crew members were being led out in custody, but one broke free, running straight toward the ambulance where children were being treated. Toward Lucia, Rex moved like lightning. 70 pounds of trained muscle intercepted the man 20 feet from the ambulance. The takedown was brutal, efficient, final. Rex held the screaming man until agents arrived, then limped back to Margaret's side as if nothing had happened. "My God," Sarah breathed. "He's not done," Bob said quietly. "His mission isn't complete until every child is safe." The sun climbed higher, revealing the scope of the operation. 17 arrests at the port alone. 3 more ships searched. The trafficking network that had seemed invincible 12 hours ago was crumbling, and at the center of it all was a scarred German shepherd who'd refused to let death stop his duty. Bob's phone rang. An unknown number. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Principal Henderson at Lincoln Middle School. I'm calling all senior staff. There's been an incident. Several teachers were arrested this morning and—" "I know," Bob interrupted. "I'm the one who identified them." Silence. Then, "Bob, what have you gotten involved in?" He looked at Lucia sleeping in the ambulance, at Rex maintaining his vigil, at Sarah treating injured children with tears streaming down her face. "Something that should have happened years ago," he said, and hung up. Martinez approached with a tablet. "Mr. Mitchell, I need you to look at something. The ship's manifest lists more children than we found. According to this, there should be 31. Bob's blood chilled. 8 more children. Where? Rex's bark cut through everything. Sharp, urgent, directed at the ship. He'd left Margaret's side for the first time, standing rigid, nose pointing at the vessel's stern. "He knows," Bob said. "There are more children on that ship." Martinez was already on her radio. "All units, we need another sweep. Possible additional victims aboard." But Rex wasn't waiting. Despite his injuries, despite exhaustion, he headed back toward the ship. This time, Bob didn't hesitate. Teacher and dog moved together, an unlikely partnership bound by purpose. The children still aboard that ship didn't know rescue was coming. But Rex knew where they were, and Rex never left anyone behind. The explosion shattered the dawn quiet, sending a fireball into the sky from the ship's stern. Bob felt the heat wash over him as Rex threw his body sideways, knocking them both behind a container. Debris rained down like deadly confetti, metal shards embedding in the asphalt where they'd been standing. "Mitchell, report!" Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. "We're alive," Bob gasped, his ears ringing. "The ship. Fail-safe charges. The bastards would rather destroy evidence than face justice." Her voice was grim. "Fire department's en route. But if there are children in that section—" Rex was already moving, limping worse now, blood seeping through his fur from fresh wounds, but his eyes remained fixed on the burning ship with desperate intensity. "He's going back in," Bob said. "The children must be in the damaged section. That's suicide. The whole stern could collapse." Bob clicked off the radio. He'd made his choice the moment Rex had knocked him to safety instead of saving himself. The dog looked back once, amber eyes meeting Bob's, a clear message passing between them. Together. They entered through a maintenance hatch Rex led them to, the metal already growing hot. Smoke billowed through corridors, emergency sprinklers creating a hellish steam that burned Bob's lungs. Rex stayed low, using his training, occasionally looking back to ensure Bob followed. The ship groaned around them, metal twisting from heat. They descended into areas Bob hadn't seen before. Crew quarters converted to cages, medical facilities that turned his stomach. And always, Rex pulled them forward, deeper into danger. They found the first body at the bottom of a ladder, a crew member overcome by smoke. Rex barely paused, stepping over him. But when they reached a sealed door marked with medical symbols, the dog went frantic, clawing despite the burning metal. Bob wrapped his jacket around his hands and yanked the wheel lock. The door burst open, revealing a scene from nightmares. 8 children, just as the manifest promised, but these weren't like the others. These children were connected to IV drips, unconscious, laid out on gurneys like inventory. Medical charts hung from each bed. Bob's teaching experience hadn't prepared him for this, but his humanity had. "Organ harvesting," he whispered, pieces clicking together. Richard Chen's medical expertise, the emphasis on healthy children, the special buyers. Rex was already at work, using his teeth to release wheel locks, pushing gurneys toward the door. Bob grabbed the nearest one, a girl maybe 7 years old, Hispanic, beautiful despite the pallor of sedation. Her chart read, "Match confirmed, Seattle buyer, 48 hours." 48 hours from losing her heart to save someone deemed more valuable. "We can't move them all," Bob said, smoke thickening. Not in time. Rex barked once, sharp, then did something extraordinary. He ran to a wall panel Bob hadn't noticed, stood on his hind legs despite the obvious pain, and hit a red button with his paw. Immediately, the sprinkler system intensified, and a recorded voice began, "Medical emergency evacuation protocol activated, oxygen systems engaged." The smoke began clearing slightly. Emergency oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like a commercial airline. Rex had bought them time. "James taught you ship protocols," Bob marveled. "You magnificent creature." They worked frantically, Bob pushing gurneys while Rex cleared the path, moving debris with his injured body. The first child stirred. A boy, maybe 10, Native American features. His eyes opened, unfocused from drugs. "Shh," Bob soothed. "You're safe. We're getting you out." "The angel dog," the boy mumbled. "Mom said angel dog would come." Above them, another explosion rocked the ship. The ceiling buckled, raining insulation and cable. Rex positioned himself over the boy's gurney, taking the brunt of falling debris. Bob's radio crackled. He'd forgotten it was on. "Mitchell, fire crews report you have maybe 3 minutes before structural collapse. Get out now." 3 minutes. 8 children. Bob had failed at many things since Helen died, but he wouldn't fail at this. "Rex, we need help." The dog understood. He raced away, leaving Bob pushing 2 gurneys at once. The corridor seemed endless, smoke thickening again despite the sprinklers. Bob's chest burned, his vision blurring. At 68, his body had limits his will couldn't overcome. He collapsed to one knee, still gripping the gurneys. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the unconscious children. "I'm so sorry." Then he heard it, barking, multiple voices, and suddenly the corridor filled with firefighters in full gear. Rex had led them directly to Bob's location. "We've got them!" a firefighter shouted, lifting Bob bodily. "Move! Move! Move!" They emerged into daylight as the ship's stern collapsed entirely, The space they'd occupied moments before now twisted metal and flame. Bob counted gurneys obsessively. 8. All 8 children out, alive. Medical teams swarmed them. Bob found himself on a gurney, oxygen mask pressed to his face, but he fought it off. "The children are stable." Sarah appeared beside him, her face streaked with soot and tears. "You saved them, Bob. You and Rex saved them all." "Where?" Bob looked around frantically. Sarah's expression crumbled. He's in surgery. The debris, the smoke inhalation, his previous injuries, they don't know if—" Bob tried to rise, but gentle hands held him down. Margaret Sullivan stood there, IV pole in hand, having clearly left her hospital bed against orders. Her face was paper white, but fierce with determination. "He'll survive," she said. "My boy trained him, and Sullivans don't quit, neither do their dogs." The next hours blurred, hospital rooms, police interviews, media storms. Bob learned the full scope. The 8 children from the medical ward were part of an organ trafficking ring that reached into major hospitals. Wealthy clients, desperate for transplants, asking no questions about young donors who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The Native American boy, Thomas, had awakened fully. His testimony was devastating. He'd been taken from his reservation school, told his family was dead. The traffickers specifically targeted indigenous children, believing they'd be less missed, their disappearances less investigated. But the angel dog came, Thomas told investigators, 3 times, showed us pictures of sky, told us in dog language that someone was coming. Bob sat beside Thomas's bed, holding the boy's hand while he gave his statement. Through the window he could see protesters gathering, some demanding justice, others claiming the story was exaggerated, fake news designed to smear upstanding citizens. Among those upstanding citizens now in custody, 2 city councilmen, a Superior Court judge, 3 school board members, and a hospital administrator. The network hadn't just been criminals, it had been community leaders, people, parents trusted with their children. Bob's phone rang constantly. Reporters, former colleagues expressing shock, parents wanting to know if their children had been targets. He ignored them all, focused only on updates about Rex. 6 hours into surgery, Dr. Patricia Volkoff emerged. The veterinary surgeon looked exhausted but not defeated. "He's stable," she announced. "Multiple surgeries ahead, months of recovery. He'll never be a working dog again, but he'll live." Margaret collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Sarah hugged Bob so hard his ribs protested. But Bob felt something break inside him, not damage, but release. The wall he'd built after Helen's death, the one that said he was too old, too useless, too forgotten to matter, it crumbled like the ship's stern. "Can we see him?" Margaret asked. "He's still under, but—" "Yes, he seems to rest better with familiar voices nearby." They found Rex in a specialty veterinary ICU, more machine than dog at the moment. Tubes, monitors, bandages covering most of his scarred body. But his chest rose and fell steadily, and his ears twitched slightly when Margaret spoke his name. "My brave boy," she whispered. "James would be so proud. You finished the mission." Bob thought of the children Rex had saved. 31 lives directly, countless others through the evidence he'd gathered. A dog who'd been declared dead, written off, discarded, had accomplished what entire law enforcement agencies couldn't. "Mr. Mitchell?" a young voice called from the doorway. Emma stood there, Sarah's daughter, clutching a piece of paper. She approached Rex's bed slowly, respectfully. "I drew this for him," she said, showing the picture. It was Rex, but not as he was, scarred, broken, wounded. In Emma's drawing he stood proud and whole, surrounded by children, a halo of light around his noble head. "Just like my dreams," she whispered, "the angel dog who saves everyone." Bob took the drawing gently. We'll make sure he sees it when he wakes up." Emma nodded solemnly, then asked the question Bob had been dreading. "Will he be okay? Really okay?" Bob looked at Rex. Damaged but breathing, hurt but healing, scarred but still fighting. He thought of his own scars, visible and invisible, of Margaret's illness, Sarah's struggles, the children facing years of therapy. "He'll be different," Bob said finally. "We all will be. But different doesn't mean broken. Sometimes it means stronger in the places that matter." Emma considered this with 8-year-old gravity. "Like superheroes, they get hurt but come back better?" "Exactly like superheroes," Sarah confirmed, gathering her daughter close. Outside Rex's window, the sun set over Santa Monica, painting the sky in shades of hope and remembrance. Tomorrow would bring trials, testimonies, the long road of justice and recovery. But tonight, in a veterinary ICU, a retired teacher kept vigil beside a dying woman and her son's dog, a German shepherd who'd refused to let death stop his duty to innocent children. Bob reached through the bars of Rex's crate, letting his fingers rest gently on unmarred fur. "Thank you," he whispered, "for choosing me, for reminding me that faithful warriors come in all forms, for teaching this old teacher that the lesson never ends. It just begins again." Rex's tail, despite everything, managed one weak thump. Message received. Mission continues. The courtroom erupted when Rex entered. Despite his wheelchair apparatus supporting his paralyzed hindquarters, despite the service vest marking him as evidence, he moved with the same quiet dignity that had saved 31 children. Bob walked beside him, one hand resting protectively on the handle of the custom mobility device Sarah had designed. "Objection!" Defense attorney William Cromwell shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is clearly an emotional manipulation. A dog cannot provide testimony." "The dog isn't testifying, Counselor," Judge Patricia Hawkins replied coldly. "He's demonstrating. As established in military court precedent, K-9 units can provide evidence through trained responses. Overruled." It had been 4 months since the ship raid, 4 months of surgeries, recovery, and preparation for this moment. The prosecution of 47 defendants in the largest child trafficking case in California history hinged partly on Rex's evidence. Bob helped position Rex facing the defendant's table. Richard Chen sat among them, his physician's arrogance replaced by something hollow. When Rex's eyes locked onto him, Chen actually flinched. "Agent Martinez," the prosecutor began, "please explain what we're about to see." Diana Martinez, now leading the federal task force, stood beside a large screen. Rex was trained in suspect identification by Marine Sergeant James Sullivan. He can indicate positive identification through specific trained responses that were documented in his military service record. "Objection!" "Counselor," Judge Hawkins warned, "interrupt again and you'll be held in contempt." Martinez continued, "We'll show photographs on the screen. Rex will respond only to individuals he encountered during his investigation." The first photo appeared, a dock worker not involved in the case. Rex remained still. The second, another uninvolved party. No response. The third, Chen's associate from the warehouse. Rex's response was immediate. He rose on his front legs, issued a single sharp bark, and maintained unwavering eye contact with the screen. His scarred body trembled with tension, but his indication was clear. "Let the record show positive identification," the prosecutor stated. They continued through 23 photographs. Rex identified 17 with perfect accuracy. Each person he'd encountered during his captivity, his surveillance, his rescue missions. The courtroom grew increasingly silent as the implications sank in. But the moment that broke the case came when Martinez displayed a photograph not on the list. James Sullivan in marine dress blues. Rex's entire demeanor changed. He issued not his identification bark but a long, mournful howl that raised goosebumps on every arm in the courtroom. Then he turned to Margaret, who sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. "That's my son," Margaret said, her voice carrying clearly. "Murdered for discovering this network. Objection. Prejudicial. Sustained," Judge Hawkins said quietly. "The jury will disregard. But, Counselor, I'd advise your clients to consider plea arrangements. This dog's loyalty to his dead handler speaks louder than any testimony about his reliability." During the lunch recess, Bob found himself in the courthouse cafeteria with Margaret and Sarah. Rex lay between them, accepting gentle pets from Emma, who'd been allowed to miss school for the historic testimony. 20 years, Margaret said quietly. "That's what the prosecutor thinks Chen will get with a plea deal. 20 years for stealing children's lives, their organs, their futures." "It's not enough," Sarah agreed, her voice bitter. "But it's something." Bob watched Emma carefully adjusting Rex's wheelchair so he could reach his water bowl more easily. The little girl who'd dreamed of German shepherds saving people now lived with one who'd done exactly that. The circular nature of it suggested something Bob had learned in 45 years of teaching. Life had patterns, if you lived long enough to see them complete. "Mr. Mitchell?" A woman approached their table hesitantly. "I'm Maria Gonzalez. You saved my daughter Lucia from the ship." Bob remembered, the tiny girl who wouldn't let go of Rex. "How is she?" "Healing, slowly, but I wanted to ask." Maria knelt beside Rex, who immediately softened his posture. "Lucia has nightmares, every night, except when I show her pictures of Rex." The therapist suggested, would it be possible for her to visit him? Before Bob could respond, Rex made the decision. He wheeled himself closer to Maria, placing his scarred head against her trembling hands. "He'll be at Margaret's house every Saturday," Sarah said. "Bring Lucia, bring any of the children who need to see him." And so it began. What the media would later call the Rex effect. Traumatized children finding courage in a paralyzed dog who understood their scars. That afternoon's testimony focused on the medical evidence. Sarah took the stand, explaining how she'd discovered the trafficking ring's connection to her ex-husband's clinic. Her voice remained clinical, professional, until the prosecutor asked about Emma. "I learned my daughter was one of Rex's first rescues," Sarah said, her composure cracking. 3 years ago, before I adopted her, she was taken from a foster home scheduled for harvest. Rex identified her captors during a military operation. She was 2 years old." Bob felt the courtroom's shock ripple like a wave. Emma, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand. "That's why I drew the pictures," Emma whispered. "I remembered the angel dog, even when everyone said I was too young to remember anything." The defense tried to discredit Rex's identifications, bringing in their own experts. But their case crumbled when security footage was revealed, footage from hidden cameras in Rex's collar during his captivity, showing him being beaten for refusing to fight, showing him sneaking food to imprisoned children, showing crew members discussing using him to terrorize victims. Instead, Martinez testified, he became their hope. "We have testimony from 17 children that Rex visited them repeatedly, brought them food, showed them pictures of rescued victims to maintain their hope." The knockout blow came from an unexpected source. Thomas, the Native American boy from the medical ward, was deemed strong enough to testify via video link. His words were simple, devastating. "They told us we were spare parts, that nobody would miss us because we were throwaway kids. But Rex showed us we mattered. He came back even when they hurt him. He came back because we mattered." During a break, Bob found himself alone with Rex in a quiet hallway. The dog was exhausted, the effort of maintaining his professional demeanor clearly draining. "You can rest," Bob told him. "You've done enough." but Rex's eyes remained alert, scanning for threats even in the courthouse. Bob understood. The mission wasn't complete until every child was safe, every criminal convicted. James Sullivan had trained his dog too well to quit. "Your Honor," Cromwell made one last attempt. "The prosecution is anthropomorphizing this animal, attributing human motivations—" "Counselor," Judge Hawkins interrupted, "I've reviewed this dog's service record. 34 confirmed rescues in Afghanistan, a Purple Heart equivalent for military working dogs, documented evidence of him continuing his handler's mission for 2 years after Sergeant Sullivan's death. If you're arguing he lacks the capacity for loyalty, duty, and protective instinct, you're insulting every service member in this courtroom." The final evidence was the most damning. The USB drives Rex had hidden, one in the suitcase, one at Margaret's house, 3 more in locations he later led investigators to, contained financial records showing the trafficking ring's reach. Judges, politicians, medical professionals, educators, a cancer that had metastasized through California's power structures. "The dog did what we couldn't," the lead FBI investigator testified. "He got inside their operations, gathered evidence while maintaining his cover as a traumatized animal. His intelligence work rivals any human undercover operation I've seen." As testimony concluded, Rex performed one final duty. Martinez brought out the suitcase, the same one Bob had found that morning in the park. Rex approached it slowly, and with precise movements, opened it himself. Inside, alongside the original items, were new additions, photographs of all 31 rescued children, safe and healing. Rex selected one photo carefully, James Sullivan with a group of Afghan children he'd saved. The dog carried it to Margaret, placing it gently in her lap before returning to his position. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. That evening, Bob sat with Margaret in her garden. Rex lay between them, finally allowed to rest. The late summer sun painted everything golden, peaceful. Margaret's latest treatment had bought her time, not a cure, but seasons she hadn't expected to see. "He would have been so proud," Margaret said, watching Rex doze. "James always said Rex was special. Not just his training, but his heart. He chose his pack carefully." Bob thought about that morning 8 months ago, an old man contemplating suicide, finding a scarred dog with a suitcase. The circle of it still amazed him. "We're having dinner with the Gonzalez family tomorrow," Bob mentioned. "Lucia's speaking now." "Single words, but it's progress. And Thomas's family is visiting next week," Margaret added. "His grandmother wants to perform a blessing ceremony for Rex. She says in her tradition, warrior spirits can inhabit different forms." Rex's ears twitched at his name, but he didn't wake. In sleep, his scarred face looked peaceful. Bob's phone buzzed. Emma had sent a photo from inside where she was helping Sarah prepare dinner. The picture showed Rex's mobility wheel decorated with children's drawings, stick figures holding hands with a 4-legged hero. 47 guilty pleas so far, Margaret said quietly. Chen got 30 years after Thomas testified. The organ harvesting charge changed everything. "It's not over," Bob reminded her. "The international connections, the buyers list." "No," Margaret agreed, "but it's a start." James wrote in his last letter that evil flourishes when good people feel too small to make a difference. Rex proved him right. Size doesn't matter, species doesn't matter. What matters is refusing to give up. As darkness fell, they helped Rex inside. His wheelchair caught on the doorframe, and for a moment the proud military dog looked frustrated by his limitations. Then Emma appeared, naturally adjusting his path, chattering about her school day as if helping paralyzed hero dogs navigate was perfectly normal, which Bob realized it had become. Their strange family, An old teacher, a dying woman, a single mother, a rescued child, and a broken dog who'd saved them all had become beautifully, impossibly normal. The trial would continue tomorrow. More testimony, more evidence, more tiny victories against an enormous evil. But tonight, Rex was home, surrounded by his pack, his mission not complete, but progressing. Bob thought of his wife Helen, how she'd always fed strays, always believed in second chances. She would have loved Rex, would have understood immediately what Bob had taken months to learn. Sometimes angels came with 4 legs and scars, and salvation could arrive tied to a bench with a note calling it broken. As Bob headed to his room, he'd moved into Margaret's guest house to help with Rex's care. He paused at the doorway. Rex was awake again, watching him with those amber eyes that had seen too much, but somehow still believed in good. "Thank you," Bob whispered. Rex's tail managed one strong thump against his bed. Tomorrow they'd fight again. Tonight, they were home. The November rain drummed against the windows of Margaret's house as Bob carefully lifted Rex into his wheelchair. 6 months had passed since the trial's conclusion, and their lives had settled into a rhythm of healing and purpose. Rex's physical therapy session was at 10, but first came their morning ritual, visiting the memorial garden they'd created for James. 43 more arrests yesterday, Margaret said, entering the kitchen with her tablet. The buyers list Rex uncovered keeps bearing fruit. A senator in Nevada, 2 federal judges in Texas. Her voice carried satisfaction tinged with exhaustion. The cancer was winning, slowly but surely, though she'd outlived every prediction. Rex wheeled himself to her side, resting his scarred head against her hip. He always knew when she was in pain. "The president wants to award Rex the Medal of Valor," Bob said, pouring coffee. "First dog ever nominated for a civilian honor." Margaret smiled. James would have laughed. He always said Rex hated ceremonies. As if in agreement, Rex snorted and moved to the door, clearly ready for their morning visit. The memorial garden sat in the backyard's corner, a simple stone bearing James's name, surrounded by flowers planted by the children Rex had saved. 31 small handprints in concrete formed a path leading to it. They stood in the rain, Rex perfectly still despite the water soaking his fur. This was their church, their moment of connection between the living and the lost. "Sarah called," Bob said quietly. "Emma's officially been accepted into the Junior K-9 Handler program. Youngest ever admitted." Margaret's face lit up. James started that program. He believed children who'd experienced trauma could best understand traumatized dogs. Rex's ears perked at the sound of approaching vehicles. Through the gate came a stream of familiar faces. The Saturday gathering had grown from a few families to dozens. Children who'd been voiceless victims now laughed and played, their parents forming a support network born from shared survival. Lucia Gonzalez was first through the gate, no longer the silent, terrified child from the ship. "Rex! Rex!" she called, running despite her mother's gentle warning about his wheelchair. Rex lowered his head, accepting her enthusiastic hug with patient grace. "She speaks because of him," Maria told Bob. "The therapist says Lucia felt if Rex could survive and still be gentle, she could survive and find her voice." Thomas arrived next with his grandmother, who'd driven from the reservation. The elderly woman approached Rex with reverence, placing a beaded collar around his neck. Warrior's honors in her tradition. Rex sat straighter as if understanding the significance. "He dreams of the children," she told Bob in accented English. "Good dreams now, not nightmares." He says Rex visits him, shows him how to be strong. The morning transformed into controlled chaos, children playing, parents talking, Rex at the center of it all. Despite his paralysis, he moved through the crowd with purpose, checking on each child, offering comfort where needed. Emma had appointed herself his assistant, helping navigate his wheelchair through the excited throng. Bob watched from the porch with Margaret and Sarah. "Remember when we thought he was broken?" he mused. "We were the broken ones," Margaret replied. "Rex just showed us how to heal." The gathering was interrupted by Diana Martinez's arrival. The FBI agent's expression immediately set Bob on alert. "We have a situation," she said quietly. "One of the international buyers, Viktor Kozlov, has entered the country. Intelligence suggests he's coming for Rex." Bob's blood chilled. They'd known this was possible. Rex's testimony had destroyed a multi-billion-dollar network. Revenge was inevitable. "How long do we have?" Margaret asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Maybe 48 hours. We're increasing security, but—" "No," Margaret interrupted. "These families come here for peace, for healing. We won't turn this into a fortress." Rex had noticed the tension. He wheeled over to Martinez, studying her with those intelligent eyes. Then he did something unexpected. He moved to the center of the yard and barked once, sharp and commanding. Every child immediately moved to their parents. Even in play, they remembered his protection signals. "He's made his choice," Bob said. "He won't abandon them." That night, Bob couldn't sleep. He found Rex in the living room, positioned where he could watch all entrances despite his mobility limitations. The dog's eyes glowed in the darkness, ever vigilant. "You know they're coming," Bob said, settling beside him. "You probably knew before we did." Rex shifted slightly, allowing Bob to rest a hand on his scarred back. They sat in companionable silence, two old warriors understanding that some battles chose you. "I was going to kill myself that morning," Bob admitted. "Had it all planned. Then I found you." He smiled sadly. "Or you found me. Still not sure which." Rex turned his noble head, fixing Bob with a gaze that seemed to see straight through him. Then deliberately, the dog placed a paw on Bob's knee, the same gesture of comfort he offered the traumatized children. "Yeah," Bob whispered. "We saved each other." The next morning brought unexpected reinforcements. Veterans from James's unit arrived throughout the day. Men and women who'd served with him heard about the threat to his dog. By evening, Margaret's house resembled a forward operating base staffed by civilians who refused to be victims again. "They don't understand," retired Gunnery Sergeant Mike Torres told Bob. "Rex isn't just evidence or a witness. He's a Marine who completed his handler's final mission. We don't leave Marines behind." Sarah had moved Emma to stay with relatives, but the girl had snuck back. "Rex needs me," she said stubbornly. "I'm his assistant." The second night, motion sensors triggered. Rex alerted first, his bark cutting through the darkness. Bob grabbed the phone, but Rex was already moving, wheelchair be damned, dragging himself toward the back door where someone was attempting entry. What followed was chaos. FBI agents swarming, veterans forming a protective perimeter, Rex continuing to bark directions despite Bob's attempts to pull him to safety. The would-be intruders were caught, but they were hired locals, not Kozlov himself. "He's testing our defenses," Martinez said grimly. "The real attempt will come soon." But the real attempt never came. The next morning, news broke that Viktor Kozlov had been found dead in his hotel room. Apparent suicide. The note spoke of nightmares about children's eyes, of a scarred dog that haunted his dreams. Security footage showed no one entering or leaving his room. "Guilt is its own justice sometimes," Margaret said quietly. Bob wondered if she was right, or if James's unit had delivered a different kind of justice. He decided he didn't need to know. The immediate threat passed, but its impact remained. The Saturday gatherings now included self-defense classes for the children, taught by the veterans. Rex participated from his wheelchair, demonstrating alertness techniques, showing the children how to read danger signs. "We're not victims anymore," Thomas announced one afternoon, standing proudly beside Rex. "We're survivors who protect each other." As Thanksgiving approached, Bob reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. From suicidal retired teacher to guardian of a paralyzed hero dog, from isolation to the center of an unlikely family spanning dozens of households. Margaret's health had declined sharply, but she remained fierce in her determination to see Rex properly honored. The Medal of Valor ceremony was scheduled for December, and she intended to be there. "He'll hate every minute of it," she told Bob, watching Rex endure Emma's attempt to polish his wheelchair. "But he'll do it for the children. Everything he does is for them now." Bob thought of the note on that distant morning. "He's broken. I can't fix him." How wrong it had been. Rex wasn't broken. He was transformed. His body might be damaged, but his spirit had evolved into something greater, a beacon of hope for the broken, a guardian angel with 4 paws in the heart of a Marine. The rain had stopped. Weak November sunshine broke through clouds, illuminating the memorial garden where children's handprints led to a fallen hero's stone. Rex sat beside it, Emma adjusting his position so he could see better, Lucia bringing him water, Thomas standing guard beside him. A broken dog who'd taught broken people that scars were just proof of survival, that love could transcend species and death, that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion could topple empires of evil. Bob smiled, remembering Helen's favorite saying, "Angels come in all forms. We just have to have eyes to see them." He saw them now, in every rescued child, every healing family, every person who'd chosen hope over fear. And at the center of it all, a German shepherd in a wheelchair, still standing watch, still completing his mission, still proving that faithful warriors never truly die. They just find new ways to serve. To our cherished listeners who've walked life's longer paths, Rex's story reminds us that our greatest chapters may still be unwritten. At 68, Bob Mitchell thought his purpose had died with his beloved Helen, that society had discarded him like yesterday's news. How many of us have felt that crushing weight of invisibility, watching the world rush past while we sit on park benches feeding pigeons, wondering if we've outlived our usefulness? But sometimes God sends angels with 4 paws and scars, teaching us that being broken is just another word for experienced enough to recognize another's pain. Rex proved that paralyzed legs can't stop a determined heart, that age and limitation mean nothing when children need protecting. Bob discovered what many of us forget, that retired teachers still teach, that grieving hearts can still love, that hands that once held dying spouses can still save lives. Our wrinkles are roadmaps of wisdom. Our losses have taught us to recognize angels in disguise. So we ask you, what unexpected angel has appeared on your life's bench when you needed them most? When did you realize that growing older meant growing stronger in ways that matter? Share your stories below, because somewhere, another Bob needs to know that morning will come.